I can see why Wile E. Coyote communicates with signs. Streamlined, effective, gets the point across. Shinichi Ikamatsu is a genius. He's a dungeon designer for The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and has done quite a few other things with Nintendo. And he specifically designed Stone Tower Temple in Majora's Mask, quite a few other things in that game in Ocarina of Time. And Stone Tower Temple is... It is... like, where do you begin? There's so many different layers here to talk about, and how it is an apex not just in Zelda level design, but video game design in general. I've been playing The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask co-op randomized with Euron for around a year now, and you know, it's been a lot of fun. We're actually right now playing a Ocarina of Time enemy shuffler randomizer. The Majora's Mask one will probably be out around maybe a year, looking like around that, and so maybe a little bit less. Regardless, we're doing that. We'll go to Majora's Mask if that comes out pretty soon, and then eventually, hopefully, there'll be an enemy shuffler for both. But regardless, we'll get back to both games as like a co-op combo randomizer, which is really cool. It's a lot of fun. I enjoy it. Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask are some of those favorite video games. They're some of the best video games ever made, and it really was a double lightning in a bottle moment. Nintendo's done this before with Metroid Prime and then Metroid Prime 2, Super Mario Galaxy and Super Mario Galaxy 2, all around in the 2000s. There was this thing where now obviously Retro Studios designed Metroid Prime, but it was still under the Nintendo umbrella, and all these games had this thing where here comes one of the best video games ever made, 3 times, right? And then they go, well, you know, we have a lot of ideas. Let's take those resources and make a direct sequel from that. And I highly encourage that. It's the opposite of what some people might call, laziness, game designer laziness. They're just reusing assets. If you reuse lightning in a bottle and make lightning in a bottle again, go for it. And that's what they did. So with The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, it's, you know, there's a lot of interesting things to that game. And just like Ocarina of Time, there's dungeons you go through, you fight bosses. Specifically, though, I want to talk about how much in awe I've been with Stone Tower Temple. I mean, ever since I was young, but you know, I've talked about it a lot. During these co-op runs I have with Euron, we've brought up Stone Tower Temple many, many times. And it's gone to the point where I've reflected even more about it is such amazing game design. From the fact that, so in The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, you have different forms you take. Link can change his forms. You get these form changes throughout the game. You get Deku Link first, you get Goron Link later, Zoro Link after that. And there's 4 distinct quadrants in the cardinal directions from the main overworld town, you know, Clock Town. And each cardinal direction emphasizes a different form. Southern Swamp, you use Deku Link. Snowhead, you use Goron Link. Great Bay, you use Zoro Link a lot. And so those dungeons often emphasize those forms. Now what's cool is, you know, in Snowhead Temple, you still use Deku Link. You can for some instances. You can, you know, pop bubbles with the spin attack. Just in general, there's a lot of things that you can stun White Wolfos with Deku Link. A lot of fun. There's not really bubble enemies in Snowhead, but there's the bubbles with like the stray fairies that you can still get with Deku Link. There is a flower there. Regardless, you then also use those forms a bit in Great Bay Temple. And so that's really cool. I really like that. It really accumulates. You get to the final area of the game, which is, you know, Ikana Canyon, and talk about horror elements. The game already is one of the best E-rated horror game, along with Ocarina of Time. And the whole premise of Ikana Canyon is, you know, each quadrant of the game has a curse laid by the main villain, Majora's Mask, which is, you know, kind of taken over Skull Kid. And so the curse in Ikana Canyon is that the dead are now undead, right? The dead that wish to lay at rest cannot lay at rest, which is really fascinating. Usually in a lot of video games, zombies are depicted as evil antagonists, kill all the zombies. But in this case, the zombies, the undead, a lot of them just want to go back to rest. They're not even trying to go after you like a crazed zombie. Heck, the zombie-like characters, the Gibdos, you can talk with the Gibdo mask, and it ironically kind of humanizes them a bit. Regardless, it's still pretty haunting. They're trying to, they infect Pamilla's father, and he's slowly becoming a Gibdo. A lot of just great horror elements in this area. So you get to Stone Tower once you go to Ikana Castle, and Stone Tower, again, the things I've been talking to Euron about in these playthroughs. The thing is that in Majora's Mask, you're in a completely different world. You're in Termina. You're in another dimension. But yet the Triforce is here. It's only really it's in Stone Tower, but that's it. The Triforce is such a big symbol in Zelda, but it's in Stone Tower. And there's a leading theory that Stone Tower is like a Tower of Babel story. In this case, it's the people of Ikana are angry at the Hylian gods. It's almost like, did they forget about us? They were well aware because the Triforce is there, but they're a completely different land, a completely different, dimension. And so it's interesting that you wonder if Stone Tower is this design of trying to reach the heavens to almost mock them. And then Stone Tower flips upside down. A big motif in this dungeon is that you can turn it upside down, and imagine falling in the sky. Like, that's terrifying. And what a cool way to depict this in an already pretty terrifying game. And so I love that, and I love how these growing theories of it's almost like the gods abandoned us, so we'll do it our own way and try to mock them. Adds another layer to the darkness of The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, coming from Ocarina of Time, which had its own darkness, involved even with the royal family that did worship, the Triforce in general, the Hylian gods. This kind of starts stemming into Wind Waker, where, almost like a last-ditch effort, the Hylian gods they drowned out Hyrule when Ganon returned and there was no Hero of Time. So it's really interesting. It's almost like an I told you so from this theory of Stone Tower Temple's lost tribe, lost people, that they're like, hey, they're not as good as you think. I bet a lot of them would be like, see, look what they just did. Like, think of how many people in Wind Waker died from the Great Flood, which is awful. So regardless, there's a lot of horror build up to this, to Stone Tower. The music is awesome in such a good, eerie way. You can hear the ocarina confidently play throughout this piece. This is the last Zelda game where Koji Kondo is the full-on composer. After this, starting with Wind Waker, he kind of takes more of a back seat and lets other people, start writing music and stuff. Obviously, he's still involved, but Majora's Mask is kind of his final bout, his final swan song. In fact, Stone Tower is specifically his final dungeon full piece. Now, he's helped out with future dungeons, but it's really fascinating that it accumulates to Stone Tower Temple. And in this temple, I mentioned you flip upside down, but another thing is you use all three of Link's transformations, also, his human form, to solve puzzles throughout the dungeon. All four forms are used in such a cool way. There's all these different, labyrinths you go through, all these different enemies you fight. There's all this different terrain for all the different forms, to the point that I keep telling you, Ron, I was like, people have been wanting a third 64 Zelda for a long time, and I would love to help out. I think Nintendo is sitting on a gold mine there where they can make a third game in the aesthetics of the 64 games. You can use the 3DS visuals and use a similar sound design there, but I do think that, when it comes to the potential, Stone Tower Temple is only scratching the surface. And what I think they could do is have, in the next game, Link retains basically almost all of his equipment from Majora's Mask. It's like Banjo-Tooie, where in Banjo-Tooie, they keep all their moves from the last game. I think you do that, and then have a bunch of different temples and dungeons, just like Stone Tower, where you're implementing these four different forms in such fun, creative ways. You can add new power-ups to the forms. That would be fun too. Different ways to enhance, like Deku Link's flying, Goron Link's rolling, Zoro Link's swimming. lot of potential there. And Stone Tower Temple, it really just feels like that potential is just getting started. And yet it also feels like such a great final dungeon and such an amazing game. I really enjoy it. I really enjoy the atmosphere. Twin Mold is such a cool boss, and it's cool that to this day people talk about the theories of what lost tribes were there in Ikana Canyon and what they thought about the Hylian gods and their world in general. Majora's Mask is that type of game that continues to get people to reflect upon life itself and general existentialism, but that existentialism also is involved with a character like Link that's giving hope to characters. He's inspiring them. So he reaches a place where many of the people in the area are already dead. So how does he inspire them? And as the King Egos du Ikana pleads, he's like, please let us go back to rest. It's a really interesting way to reflect upon the final area of the game, and what's considered by many fans one of the greatest dungeons in the Legend of Zelda series. I agree, and it's definitely my favorite Zelda game, with Ocarina of Time as number 1.1 for sure. They're really close neck and neck to each other. I mean, again, lightning in a bottle, lightning in a bottle. And I hope Nintendo looks back at specifically Stone Tower Temple and understands that, wow, we were firing off all cylinders and testing our players with the things they've accumulated throughout the game. And again, what's considered just a well-made dungeon and just a fun challenge with great music playing. And whether you're an old Zelda fan or a new Zelda fan, it's awesome to see all these fans of the series come to this dungeon and reflect upon how great and creative it is. I haven't even talked about how it has two mid-bosses. You got Gomez and the Garo Master, and they both have awesome designs as well. They brought back the Igors from Link to the Past, who are now hulking menaces. They really fired off all cylinders. It's really similar to the Desert Palace in Link to the Past. In fact, the bosses are pretty similar. So I actually really like that. It really is kind of a love letter to Link to the Past, but also it's a hate letter, a potential hate letter to the gods of Hyrule. And what an interesting dynamic there that also again links with that feelings, the themes of existentialism that's put in Majora's Mask. Themes that, as a player, regardless of age, you feel respected. You feel respected as a player. It doesn't matter if you're young, if you're elderly. There's a lot going on in the atmosphere of Majora's Mask, and I think Stone Tower Temple is the perfect final dungeon for a masterpiece like this. I love Mondays.